Welcome to Disability News and Views, a program brought to you by the Mayor's Commission for Persons with Disabilities. I'm Jessica Doonan, the Commission's Chief of Staff. In this episode, my co-host Ken Meyer will be speaking with Kyle Robideau, a member of our Commission's Advisory Board who also works for the Massachusetts Association for the Blind. But first, I have some interesting updates from the disability community. Well, summer is finally here, so mark your calendar for Wednesday, July 13th to celebrate the signing of the Americans with Disabilities Act. Our commission will be hosting its 6th annual ADA Day on City Hall Plaza, and we invite you to join in this year's event. Activities include a resource fair with info on local disability organizations, food, music, and fun. More details are available on our website, but for now, be sure to save the date for ADA Day, Wednesday, July 13th on Boston City Hall Plaza. But before ADA Day gets here, the city's annual 4th of July celebration featuring the Boston Pops Fireworks Spectacular will take place once again on the Esplanade. Accessible seating areas will be reserved on both sides of the Charles River. On the Boston side, the accessible seating will be located within the oval to the right of the stage. On the Cambridge side, the accessible seating will be set up along a section of the Cambridge Parkway. There will be accessible bathrooms at both locations and a limited number of HP accessible parking spots. And finally, a reminder that the Boston Disability Commission Advisory Board holds its monthly meetings on the 4th Thursday of the month from 5:30 to 7:30 on the 9th floor in City Hall. Board meetings are free and open to the public. Their next meeting will be on Thursday, June 23rd from 5:30 to 7:30. All board meetings are captioned and broadcast live on Boston City TV, as well as on the city website, www.boston.gov. A full agenda is available on our website at www.boston.gov/disability. And now it's my pleasure to turn the show over to my co-host Ken Meyer for his discussion with Kyle Robideau from Massachusetts Association for the Blind. Ken?
Thank you, Jessica. And Kyle, before we discuss your accomplishments, which are many, like running in the Boston Marathon, for instance, that still fascinates me. I only run to the men's room in the cafeteria at work, but many people, I'm sure, have heard of the Mass Association for the Blind and also the Mass Commission for the Blind. Tell us, if you would, the difference between the two agencies, and then get into what you do with MAB.
Certainly, Ken, and thank you so much for having me on. So the Mass Association for the Blind and Visually Impaired was actually started in 1903, and one of the founders was a woman who you may have heard of, Helen Keller. And in their second year, they actually founded, one of the first kind of action items that they took on was establishing the Mass Commission for the Blind. So we have a long historic relationship and a very strong partnership with the Commission. In its simplest form, the biggest difference is that the Mass Association for the Blind and Visually Impaired, which we call MABV for short, we work with anyone who is either legally blind or experiencing low vision, in which the Mass Commission for the Blind is only able to work with folks who are legally blind based on their federal funding. But we have some programs that are similar to MCB, some that are different. Obviously, they are much larger, being that they are a state agency and we are a small nonprofit based out of Brookline.
All right, and tell us what you essentially are doing with the MAB.
So I work within our one-to-one volunteer program, as well as our statewide network of low vision peer support groups. So throughout all of the state, except for the Cape and Islands, we have approximately 36 low vision peer support groups. So I work with a team of folks who make sure that logistically those meetings are happening and support the staff who kind of works hands-on on that program. And then for our one-to-one volunteer program, which matches sighted volunteers with individuals who are blind or visually impaired, we have right now just over 220 volunteers working with roughly 180 individuals who are blind or visually impaired. So I provide some support to kind of the coordinator and the program assistant that work on the volunteer program.
Now, when you say peer support groups, does this mean, say, if an individual like myself lost their sight late in life, they get to sit down with a whole bunch of other people that are visually impaired or totally blind and discuss their frustrations and their problems? Is that how this works?
Exactly. So it's a great forum for exactly what you referenced. So individuals who may have had their sight in their entire life and now experiencing age-related vision loss. And it's a really powerful setting in which someone can walk into a room. They may be sad, angry, frustrated, or just have questions around their vision loss. And there could be anywhere from 5 to 20 individuals in the room who have gone through the same exact thing that they have. So it's a nice supportive environment. It's nurturing in the sense that it's, a support group, but it's also pragmatic in the sense that it provides a lot of outside speakers that come in and talk about programs, services that are available to them as they're experiencing their vision loss.
When someone is in the process of losing their sight and it's getting worse every day, what happens if they call you? Do you or does a member of the agency go out to their home and start equipping their home with maybe possibly a larger telephone with bigger buttons if they still have some sight, or marking a stove, or other things in the home?
So a little bit of all of that, depending on kind of what their needs are. I mean, our goal at the end of the day is to provide individuals with both skills and support to live as confident and independent lives as possible while experiencing vision loss or maybe not having any vision. So depending on what sort of support or resources they may need, if it's a skill building kind of support, we can have a whole team. We have about 16 or 17 occupational therapists who are trained in low vision care, who are able to go to people's homes and do exactly what you said, kind of assess what, if any, usable vision they may have, and then put an action plan together to implement achieving the goals around the items that they may be having a hard time with. So if they are having a hard time cooking, they can do high marking and talk to them about different devices, whether they be talking, measurement tools and so forth. They can high mark and dot the stove and the microwave to help them out in that sense as well.
And I'm sure with all of the technology that has, I discussed this earlier with other people, but I'm sure with all the technology that has made itself available in the last several years, it's a lot easier today for someone who is losing their sight than it might have been 10, 15, even 20 years ago.
There's certainly more technology that can support someone who is losing their vision or experiencing kind of significant vision loss. And part of the goal is to have real conversation with folks about the abilities of technology to kind of help support them. Then it's to assess what devices or technology, and it could be low tech, such as a magnifier, it could be high tech, like a brand new iPhone. So assessing what types of devices will be most beneficial to them and allow them to maximize their usable vision or continue to do what they want to do. Then it's providing a little bit of support and direction on where to purchase such items. We don't carry or distribute items. But then most importantly, is once they have the devices in their hand, it's the training piece. We hear often that, oh, I brought this iPad and I heard that it's accessible, but I have no idea how to use it. So we can provide, through our occupational therapists and our vision rehab program, support around training on how to use particularly the accessible features that are more and more being built into these types of devices.
Let's talk about Braille. I worked with a young lady who lost her sight in a motorcycle accident and when she was about 16 or 17 years of age, and got frustrated, didn't want to learn what the word dog or the word cat looked like, and as a result, could not read Braille. Mm-hmm. I, on the other hand, grew up with it. I went to a school for the blind. I was blind since birth, mm-hmm. and I learned Braille. Is that still an acceptable form of communication for people today?
Most definitely. I think it's an acceptable form, and I think it's an individual choice if someone would like to learn it. I think, as you mentioned on your own personal experience, my experience talking to folks is that folks who were born blind or lost their sight from a very early age tend to know Braille compared to folks who may be my age and my peers who are experiencing kind of slow progressive vision loss that may not have learned Braille. But I also have a couple coworkers and peers of mine who are very motivated people who are learning Braille, just because they want to be able to know how to use it.
Good for them. I'll take them out to lunch sometime. I love to know that people still are using Braille.
Certainly. I think, in a day like today, it's really important to maximize all the technology that's happened, but also, lean on the staples that have been supporting people for many, many years.
Do people depend on computers too much?
It's a great question. I think that when used effectively, computers can be great tools. I think interpersonal communication, face-to-face, is still, in my mind, the most effective and what I rely on, but I think technology is just too broad right now not to take advantage of it. For example, we recently, about 2 years ago, we have a yearly kind of conference every year in which we bring together all of our low vision peer support group members in a one-day kind of conference or gathering, and every year there's a topic, and 2 years ago the topic was technology, and most of the folks, not all, that attend our low vision peer support groups are 60, 70, 80 years of age. So there was a little bit of pushback around why are you kind of having this topic of technology. A lot of folks don't know how to use cell phones or use computers. But we've heard some fabulous stories since that conference in which people have sought out and purchased, sometimes through the support of Easter Seals programs and other resources, they've purchased iPads and they've gotten training through Easter Seals or through us, and now they're in touch with their granddaughters or their grandchildren, and they do FaceTime and they do Skype and they get to email and they get to read the local newspaper, which more and more is in a digital rather than a paper version. So I think there are tremendous upsides to technology.
I use the Newsline every day.
Excellent. As do I. It's a wonderful, wonderful resource.
Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned volunteers. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about, how people can volunteer, what qualifications, if any, they have to have, and how do you promote the fact that you need volunteers?
So we promote the fact partly by having conversations like this. We do have a pretty extensive waiting list now. We have just about 100 individuals who are blind or visually impaired waiting for a volunteer. So we spend a tremendous amount of time trying to recruit and identify and cultivate and train volunteers. I think someone who makes a great volunteer is someone who is reliable, has strong communication skills, and is compassionate. And we have folks come in for mandatory 2 to 2.5 hour training in which we talk about kind of disability and blindness awareness items first, and then the nuts and bolts of our program, what are the expectations, how to set good boundaries. We do a sighted guide training, so they're equipped at walking with folks either through their home or in their community. Mm-hmm. So, I think every year we average between 80 to 90 individuals that come through our doors for training.
And these people will help with shopping and mail and things like that as well?
Certainly. So shopping and mail are probably two of the most highly requested activities that folks ask for. So, and the grocery shopping piece is all-inclusive. So it's usually a ride to the grocery store, sharing their site throughout the grocery store, identifying which items are in sale, what are the prices, what are the brands, and that sort of stuff, and then helping them return back to their home and sort either label or braille label or whatever it may be, get their groceries back into the cupboards. And mail and writing out checks is a big one. And we're also seeing an uptick in folks who are asking for sighted guides, either for walking or running or going to the gym for health and fitness purposes as well.
Is it, I don't know how to ask this question, for younger or older people to lose their sight, is it harder for older people who might have the attitude, I had it all my life, I want to have it to the end, or younger people who say, I'm only 30 years old, I'm going to lose my eyesight, I can't manage anymore? Which group accepts it better?
I don't know which group accepts it better. I was just having a conversation a couple of weeks ago with Bill Rader, who is on our board and was the executive director at the National Braille Press for about 30 years, and he lost his sight due to a tragic accident, I think when he was in his late teens. And I think it's a conversation we have frequently, and him and I were joking and going back and forth. Is it tougher losing your sight, from birth, or
due to... I get asked that all the time.
Yeah, due to an accident, or progressive, where it's kind of this notion of, well, when am I going to lose it? How quickly am I going to lose it? Mm-hmm. I think all in and of themselves, they present their own challenges, but also opportunities.
Now, you have run the Boston Marathon. Tell us about that and what it's like to do that. You run with a sighted guide, even though you do have some sight. But tell us about that and the training that goes into working with a sighted guide to run with someone like you or any visually impaired person in the marathon?
Certainly, and I should start by saying I did not know of this community or even the concept of sighted guides until I started working at MABV in 2013. I had run a couple marathons on my own. The last two that I ran, I fell pretty early on. I tripped over someone one time, and then I hit a orange cone the other time.
That'll do it.
That will do it, and that'll do it very quickly, and really early on, actually, within the first mile. So I learned about this whole concept in the community of guides while working at the Mass Association for the Blind and Visually Impaired, and I'm proud that we spend a tremendous amount of time, both during marathon season and now more and more throughout the year, matching folks with sighted guides. Because, as we talked about, it's really about building confidence and independence and knowing that with a little bit of support, you can still continue to do the things that you want to do. I still run. It's me moving my legs. It's me taking in the liquids and the food. But it's the guide who's sharing their sight with me to make sure that I don't run into, street signs or street furniture or fire hydrants or small children. And during races, particularly the Boston Marathon, when it's so crowded, they're the true heroes that are getting me around, and 30 to 40 of my peers every Boston Marathon that are helping us get around people, get into and out of water breaks, things that I can really no longer do on my own or no longer do with a lot of confidence. So instead of worrying about, am I going to hit someone or am I going to throw a paper cup after I drink my water at someone, I now can just really focus on executing my race and run to my greatest ability, knowing that I have a guide there to help me through that.
So are there any qualifications that you specifically look for in wanting to hire a guide or have a guide go with you?
I think in the simplest form, it's someone that the biggest thing, to be honest with you, is for them to know their left and rights. That's the biggest. And also, when logistically speaking, when we're recruiting guides, we always want to have sighted guides who are faster and in better shape than the person who they're guiding. Mm-hmm. Because there's a tremendous amount, I'll say, if you're running a marathon or even a 5K, you're exerting physical energy, but also to guide, you're exerting a tremendous amount of mental energy as well. So you need to be able to do that, one, physically, to kind of be able to speak and hold a conversation during that time, but you also don't want them to be exerting enough energy in which they're going to burn out. So you want them to be at, if I'm running a 4-hour marathon, ideally, my sighted guide would run a 3:30 or 3:40.
So how far in advance do you start looking for a guide?
Sometimes it's the day before, sometimes it's a couple months in advance. I mean, I was very lucky this year. I run with a shoe company called Topo Athletic, which is actually based here in Newton, Mass, and I am equipped with a number of Topo shoes. So I partnered with Topo, and they recruited a fellow Topo ambassador from San Francisco who was very anxious to be a guide and was willing to come to Boston. So we made arrangements, I think, starting in January, for him to be my sighted guide. We talked over the phone a couple times. We sent emails talking about logistics and what I prefer and strategy and so forth. And we actually met on Saturday, 2 days before the marathon, did a quick 2-mile run together, declared ourselves ready to go. And he did a masterful job in guiding me through 26.2 miles on Monday.
Are there more blind runners every year, or does it decrease?
I think as we raise awareness about the functionality of sighted guides and trying not to set limitations on ourselves, we are recruiting and identifying more and more folks. I often, partly because I am a runner, I'll often do a home visit in our one-to-one volunteer program. So we do home visits for all the consumers, the folks who are blind and visually impaired. And most often in those conversations, I somehow will make a point of bringing up that I run in hopes that the other person will say that they run. And they're like, and I can't tell you how many times folks have said to me, they're like, wait, you run, but you're blind, right? And I'm like, yeah. They're like, well, how do you do that? So I explained the concept of sighted guide, and they said, wow, I had no idea that that exists. I'm like, yeah, right? It's amazing. They said, well, how do I get one? I'm like, great, we're here. We can work on finding you a reader and now helping you find a sighted guide to run with. Or it could also be walking as well. Anything that's related to fitness, if it's for health and fitness purposes, we'll match someone with a guide that needs to go to the gym and they have a hard time getting around the gym and pulling the pins or setting the treadmills or whatever it may be at the gym class, but also walking too. We just started working with a young woman in January. Amazing story, concert pianist, never run before, and for whatever reason she decided that she wanted to start getting in shape, and we had 2 guides work with her for a month or 2 that just simply walked throughout her neighborhood, and they also walked in a local track, and then they built up from there. And I think 3 or 4 months later, she's now, running close to, I think, a mile. Every time she goes out, she's doing 2 to 4 miles. And she just called me the other day asking me for when is there an upcoming race? What races can she do? So she's totally caught the bug, and this is someone who, had never been active prior to that. And then the flip side of that is folks who've been active, lost their sight like myself, or had decreased vision, stopped running, and now they learn that they can continue running with the support of sighted guides.
The Carroll Center has what they call Apple Mondays. Once a month they have classes working with people who have bought an iPad or an iPhone. If someone wanted it more or on a one-to-one basis, could they come to MAB?
In about, hopefully, a couple months, they can come to us. So we, as part of we don't do technology classes. Our occupational therapists are trained. They actually went to the Carroll Center to get training on iPad, particularly the accessibility functions. But we have received an increasingly high number of requests of folks asking for assistance. Maybe it's 1 time or just 2 times, something in addition to just a class around technology. So we've been talking for the past couple months about adding an additional layer to our volunteer program in which we are providing technology assistance to consumers who we're working with. And at first we kicked around the idea of, well, we can just hire some sort of consultant who could be either in a per diem or part-time. But now we're really pushing for, and we realized, as I'm sure you know, the true experts in accessive technology are the folks who are using it every day. Right. So we're actually going to try to recruit individuals who are blind and visually impaired to be volunteers to essentially work with their peers. And that could be on a one-to-one basis in person. It could be, a resource over the phone.
In case anyone wants to be a volunteer or might need help in their home or might need help with some of the other things that you suggested, is there a website and or a telephone number people can call?
Certainly. So our website is essentially mabvi.org. So it's mabvi.org. And our toll-free 1-800 number that is routed through our Worcester office, but they send it to us. It's 1-800-854-0700.
Okay, and there's a local number too, right?
They can contact me if they want. My number is 617-926-4312.
Perfect. Kyle Robidoux, thank you very, very much. And maybe I interviewed the next winner of the Boston Marathon.
Very, very unlikely, but I will certainly run it again. But I appreciate the vote of confidence.
It's nice to have you here. And we thank our audience for watching again another edition of Disability News and Views. So long, everybody.